This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, ma'am. So this is Julia Decker. I'm Planning Manager, Clatsop County Community Development. And this morning, so Connie Moore, who has been the vice chair and who has been chairing the meetings because we didn't have a chair, is not able to attend today. So you don't have a chair or a vice chair this morning, although we can work tentatively toward getting an election of officers going. You were supposed to select a liaison to the countywide group today as well. But I want to real quickly go around the we'll call it the room for lack of a better term. We'll go around the room really quickly and have everybody introduce themselves because we have some new folks on the committee. So I've just said who I am. Let's see. Mr. Olstead, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Herb Olstead here, Jewell, Oregon.
And Susanna?
Susanna Gladwin here. I also live in Jewell. I've been there for almost 50 years. I want to say Herb has been there for generations, his family. So.
Okay. Pam Birmingham?
I'm Pam Birmingham. I live in Elsie, and where the power just came on late last night, since being off since early on Tuesday. So I must admit I'm just now reviewing meeting information because I've had no internet, no phone, and no power for days and days.
Oh, so we're your first contact outside the household, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay. Gail, did you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi, Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. And Mr. Abing is also a new committee member, so we may want to have him go next.
All right, Mr. Abing.
Okay, he's muted on his end.
Okay, so we are, Dawn, we're not able to unmute you, or you are unmuted from our perspective. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you will need to unmute your mic.
Oh, there I am. Okay.
There you are.
Hello. Donna Bing, Chinook Indian Nation, and also a member of the Chinook Cultural Committee and new member of this group. Thank you for allowing me to be part of it.
Welcome.
I also reside here in Astoria, Oregon.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
We
Hello.
have a new planner on staff, and there's Don. We have a new planner on staff, and that's Jason Pollock. So Jason is joining us this morning to kind of get used to how everything works. Jason, did you want to say hi?
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Looking forward to this conversation you all are having this morning, and thanks for having me.
Okay. So we've got the introductions. I guess maybe first thing to do, we don't actually have a chair at this point. Gail, did you have a preference about how we go forward? Because we don't actually have anybody, and Connie's not here to run the meeting. She was the vice chair. Do you have any preferences about how they select to move?
Yeah, they can appoint a temporary chair just for this meeting, or they can go ahead and actually elect chair and vice chair if they want.
Okay. So Pam and Dawn and Susanna and Herb, do you have a preference?
I don't.
I'd be willing to chair with a little help. A temporary chair. I was thinking about being vice chair later, maybe.
Okay. Pam or Dawn, any preferences?
No, I'm just on board to help.
Okay. Pam?
Susanna can do it if she'd like. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I think we have consensus, Susanna, for you to go ahead and do the temporary chair thing for this meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and put the meeting over to you. Do you want to go ahead and check and see about review of the meeting summary from December 15th, 2020?
This is minutes, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, anybody have comments? I have a comment if nobody else has. On
I
the
just read
last-
them and I'm fine with them the way they are.
Okay.
Of course, now I realize I was trying to remember my comment and looking at my notes here. I'm sorry, I'm not as organized. All of this. I think. I'm sorry. No, that's okay. I'll accept them. I can comment later about including something that I wanted included, but my notes, I'm sorry, don't cover whether it was a minute note or not. So I move to accept the minutes. Everybody.
I
Let's see.
second. This is Pam.
Okay. Herb or Dawn, any comments on the summary?
No, I agree. I would approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay.
So everybody is in agreement? Say yes.
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 So the minutes are accepted, and then we move down to, do we want to immediately go to the box? Do you have something on your screen right now to go to next?
Well, we were looking at the minutes, and if we move to the agenda, the next thing on the agenda is public comment and input.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I don't actually see any members of the public present. So, I mean, looks like you could move just right straight into your Goal 5 topic today.
And should I go right down to the to-do boxes? I'm cruising down here on my computer to the action items, and actually the overview is required inventories. Should I go to that one?
Well, we had sent out the information, and we were thinking really that you would just go right straight into your Goal 5 Table 1, which is the Goal 5 policies. So you have your table 1, which is the existing policies for Goal 5, and we've sort of pulled them out for different areas. So we've got the natural area policies, the wilderness area policies, and they come from various places within all of the comprehensive plan. We tried to consolidate them. So we've got the natural areas, open space, and then we had proposed policies. Also, we have, where did it go? The community plan for this area, and there really wasn't much of anything for the Elsie Jewell and Seaside rural plans. There really wasn't much of anything, which was kind of a surprise. But if you'd like to take a look at Goal 1 policies, I think that's about page 12 in the PDF. It says page 2, but it's existing table 1, wilderness areas, natural areas, and open spaces. Goal 5, natural area policies. The first one was significant natural and scientific areas and scenic sites should be set aside for preservation and managed so as to protect the unique characteristics of the area. So I thought we'd just check and see, does anybody have anything on that section or on that page that they would like to pull out and discuss?
This is Pam. I'm fine with policy 1 and 2 and retaining those policies. Policy 3, I see that the staff recommendation is to delete the policy, and I'm not sure I understand why or what that entails. Could you elaborate, please?
So basically the staff comment on this was that Onion Peak and the surrounding land is zoned F80, which is forestry, and is already designated conservation forest lands in the comp plan. We don't have any areas designated as natural between Highway 101 and Onion Peak, and staff has been unable to verify through aerial photos that there's any type of a radio transition facility on Onion Peak or the surrounding area. So I mean, the policy's actually setting aside this area, but we can't find anything on it. Onion Peak and the immediate surrounding land is in the ownership of Onion Peak LLC, the state of Oregon, and Weyerhaeuser, and the North Coast Land Conservancy has an easement on Onion Peak to protect the subalpine forest and meadow and related vegetation. So I think staff's recommendation here was to go ahead and delete the policy because it doesn't look like it basically it doesn't look like it means anything. There isn't anything for it to relate to. There's no tower that we've been able to find. So it looks like it's just unnecessary.
And I'd like to comment.
We also had an email yesterday where Katie Volke of the North Coast Land Conservancy had been contacted about this policy, and she appears to be in agreement with staff's recommendation as well.
Yes. Okay,
Yes,
this is Pam. If Katie's okay with it, then she'll know more about it than I will. So I'm fine with deleting that.
Yes, and I wanted to comment that I would like to defer to the Southwest Coastal Group, because this is really in their area and they would know the most, and that will come up if there was anything more to add in the countywide meeting next week. On Wednesday, is it? I think. The countywide meeting?
It's on Thursday, Susanna.
Oh, Thursday. Okay. And a conservation easement I'm working through for my property, and it's a very solid protective instrument that stays with the property. So I feel good about that. I agree also with Pam. And while we're on policy 3, is everybody in agreement on that one to just accept it?
Yes.
Do we all have
Pam?
yes?
Yes.
To accept it or to delete it?
I'm sorry. The recommendations to delete.
Yes, ma'am. So everybody's on board with deleting it then?
I agree.
Herb
Yes.
agrees, okay.
Oh, yeah. So we're
Dawn?
going to delete that one.
I'm checking with Mr. Abing. Dawn, are you okay with deleting that one?
Yes, that'll be fine.
All right, thank you. Okay, so you're unanimous on that.
Yes,
Is there
but I
anything?
do want.
Oh,
I
I'm
want to
sorry.
go back to. I just think we should review each one to policy 1, and actually to go back a page to just to tidy up something under, ecologically insignificant natural areas and just tidy up the, it says Elsie County Park, AKA Nehalem Park, or Red Bluff Park. I'm not sure where the name Nehalem Park comes from. To me, that was confusing because it's not on the Nehalem River, and there are parks on the Nehalem.
That's
Well-
this is Pam. It's been on the maps as Nehalem Park. It's commonly known as Red Bluff Park, but it's been on the maps as Nehalem Park for a long time.
Okay, well, that's good. So then to just move back down, because they do have the location of it, so it's very specific, and move down to policy 1, and the staff recommends retaining policy. Unless somebody wants to discuss reasons not to retain the policy, can we just assume there's consensus? And would anybody speak up if they are opposed to this, to retain that policy? Policy 1, significant natural and scientific areas and scenic sites should be set aside for preservation and managed so as to protect the unique characteristics of the area. Anybody in opposition? Okay, I will say that we're going to retain the staff recommendation to retain the policy. And then policy 2, should I read them?
If you'd like, yes.
I will, just in case anybody can't see it. The county will cooperate with appropriate state and federal agencies and private groups to ensure that examples of the full range of Oregon's natural ecosystem are preserved for future study and enjoyment, and the staff recommends to retain the policy. Is anybody against retaining the policy? And hearing nobody, I would say we're in agreement to retain policy 2. And then we've done policy 3. I do want to make one comment on policy 3, just as it references a potential radio transmission facility. It's not applicable to Onion Peak, but I think that the county should note all the transmission towers and ham radio towers. I believe some of the ham radio towers are on private land, so that should actually come up under the hazards because the need is so important, as we saw in the 07 storm for the ham radio towers. So would that come up under hazards?
It certainly might. We're not to goal 7 yet, but no, we remember 07, and we remember that without the ham radio operators, we would have been in a much worse shape than we were. We had 0 telecommunications, including satellite, in the county for the better part of a week. So, but I believe that's part of the emergency management plan, and we will be tackling that in goal 7.
Yes, okay. And then under policy 4, it states the natural designation for Sugarloaf Mountain shall not affect the continued operation and maintenance of the radio transmitter facility there. And the staff comments and recommendations say there is currently at least one radio transmitter located on private property on Sugarloaf Mountain. The expansion of that facility was approved in 2020. The site is an essential transmitting facility in the cellular wireless connectivity network for the county. Recommend retaining policy and correcting spelling error. Anybody want to discuss that or is against that?
This is Pam. I'm in agreement with the staff recommendation.
Yes, and if nobody is, what's that, Herb?
No, I agree. I keep the policy.
Okay. Great. Okay. With no other comments, then we will retain the policy as staff recommends. And wilderness area policy, the next one is under wilderness areas policy 1. Clatsop County shall work with federal agencies in the protection of federal wilderness areas. And the staff recommends retain the policy. Any discussion?
This is Pam. I agree with staff recommendation.
So if everybody, if there's nobody that would disagree, any disagreement? If not, I would say we follow staff recommendation to retain policy. And then under table 2, which is wilderness areas, natural areas, open space, existing policies, and the Jewell Elsie Rural Community Plan. And I do have a question. How much do we need to comment on those things that are outside our area?
You can comment, I mean, or not at all. I mean, if you aren't comfortable addressing it because you don't have a lot of experience with it, it's in a different planning area, then certainly you can just go ahead and skip it. On the other hand, it's included for all of the county committees, for all the CACs, because you live in the county and you recreate in the county and you work in the county and you have experience throughout the county. I mean, we don't just stay in our little planning areas and we don't, you know, don't go anywhere else. So lots of people have experience with areas outside the planning area in which they live, or even without, even where they work. So we have it there because you may have an opinion, and we'd certainly like to hear it.
And also, the committee members should keep in mind that you are actually representing 2 planning areas. So you're representing not only Elsie Jewell, but the Seaside Rural Planning Area, which does contain Sugarloaf Mountain and Onion Peak and the Lighthouse area. So that you're actually doing double work. So you're looking at both planning areas.
True, thank you. I forgot about that, doing 2 areas.
Really? So Onion Peak would be part of ours. That's to me confusing because it's almost to the southern border. I would think it was southwestern, but that's okay. And policy 1, use of Tillamook Lighthouse shall enhance historic preservation, maintain the integrity of coastal waters, require little or no public access, and shall not substantially alter the external experience of the site except to restore its historical appearance. And the staff recommends to retain policy. Does anybody want to discuss that? Or if not, I would assume then that we are all in agreement. Any discussion?
Is the lighthouse still being used to inter bodies or ashes or whatever?
Does anybody know?
The one off of Tillamook Head, the right off of Ecola Park, I believe is still a crematorium.
Okay.
This is Pam. I agree with retaining the policy.
I find it
Me too.
interesting that it doesn't say anything about crematorium, but yes, I agree. So I think we're all in agreement. If I don't hear from Don, I will say we follow staff recommendation to retain policy. And then on open space, historic, scenic, natural areas, natural area policies. Under that is policy 1, fragile and ecologically valuable area, especially wetlands, isolated lakes, stands of old growth timbers, and areas of rare endangered species will be considered for a natural designation, and the staff recommends to retain the policy. Any discussion?
Yes, I'll chime in.
And this is Herb?
This is Don Abing,
Oh,
Chinook Nation.
Don. Okay. Yes.
The Clatsop Chinook or Chinook Indian Nation of 5 tribes wholly support this policy, but we would encourage that any old growth timbers that are still there would be augmented with 6 trees that are vital to the Chinook heritage, Chinook culture. That is the red cedar, the yellow cedar, the Sitka spruce, Oregon ash, big leaf maple, and Pacific yew.
And big leaf, and then I'm sorry. The last was what yew?
Pacific yew.
Pacific. Okay.
Yeah, YEW.
Yes.
Don, could you repeat those again? I didn't
Okay.
get them down quickly enough. Thank you.
The Chinook Indian Nation is comprised of Clatsup tribe, not to be confused with the one that's been in the paper. That's a rogue body. Wahkiakum, Cathlamet, and Wahkiakum and Cathlamet extend to the southern borders of Clatsop area there, or inside there, and then Willapa and the lower Chinook comprise the Chinook Indian Nation. But we are encouraging the replanting of the 6 specific trees that have been either decimated or never replanted, never reintroduced after the severe logging of the area from 1851 onward. A red cedar, yellow cedar, Oregon ash, Pacific yew, big leaf maple, and Sitka spruce. And then for those who don't know, big leaf maple is the only indigenous maple to this area, primarily because it is important for our fish cooking processes.
Thank you. This is Pam. I support that policy. I'm not sure how to incorporate what Don said. Any feedback on that, Julia or Gail?
I think that we can list that on the table 3 of proposed policies, and just, I'm just thinking about whether it becomes a new policy of its own or if it gets added to policy 1, but certainly you can definitely recommend adding it, and we can put it into policy 3 or proposed policies on table 3.
There was a concern I saw in the minutes, something about a park, but it didn't identify what park it was, that trees were needed to be replaced or taken out because they were either diseased or some problem with them, and no mention of a replanting to take the place of the trees that wanted to have to be removed. And so I bring this topic up because too much of the forest lands in Clatsop, Chinook land is fir, Douglas, or the hemlock. And there is not enough of our cultural trees. Well, there's hardly any of our cultural trees, except for maybe little isolated pockets of the Sitka spruce that that are have viable remaining status.
Is the Pacific yew used medicinally?
Yes, it is, and there's other uses for it. It is venerated, so it has religious religious meaning to Chinook.
And
So
then
this is,
I know. Also, I was going to say that the big leaf maple is beginning to be an economically important tree for its high sugar content, such as the eastern sugar maple. I think
Well,
it might have a higher sugar
there is
content than.
yeah, there is an ongoing study in Washington State on the big leaf maple, and certain federally recognized tribes are looking at getting the big leaf maple in growing larger amounts of the tree in order to begin a sustainable industry of extracting the maple syrup. It has a unique taste. Our culture has used it in the past as a sweetener, but it's heavily dependent on the type of weather that is going to be there. The colder, obviously, the better for extracting more concentrated maple juice from the tree. But
And who is doing the study? It's Washington State, correct?
I can't remember the name of the professor. There was an article, and I can't remember where I had come across it, either on the internet or a printed newspaper. But and I can't remember the name of the university that right offhand that is helping with this study. And it's well on its way because there is commercial production in the state of Washington right now, and everything has proven to be extremely beneficial because the flavor is so unique that certain restaurants are now using it exclusively and not introducing anything from the East Coast of America because it's so indigenous to this area that it has the unique flavor of it uh, is just can't be replaced. So this is something that eventually I know our nation is looking into it.
And yes, I have also been, because they're also selling maple water as people were really into the coconut water, and not to boil it down for sugar water, but they're actually bottling it just as the sap comes out as the maple water. So I just think it's to be important to be recognized as an important tree for that reason. And I'm definitely in agreement with these trees to study about they all have their purpose in the whole ecosystem also that's important, as well as the cultural significance for the Chinook Nation. And so
This is Julia, and I was just wondering if because we've got Dawn providing the list of the 6 trees, and the policy that you're in has to do with fragile and ecologically valuable areas and rare or endangered species being considered for natural designation. We're talking about putting Dawn's language in as a proposed new policy. I'm wondering if you want to kind of refine that a little bit and maybe add that any place where replanting is done in any of these kinds of areas, that we encourage a bias toward using these 6 species, and kind of add that in as part of your policy recommendation to really highlight those and encourage the use of those any place where there's replanting done for any of these kinds of areas.
Yes, Pam. I agree. I agree with that, as long as they are native to the area. I'm not saying, and Don, you may know more about this than I do, but in the Elsie Jewell area, as far as I know, the Pacific yew and the Oregon ash are not native. I could be wrong, but I've certainly not seen them.
Well,
but I do.
There's huge scattered all over the Clatsop State Forest.
They are, okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
A long time, and the very few, but they are, I believe, native here, and they are protected in the Clatsop State Forest, by the way, of any logging or anything. They're left.
Which tree?
The Pacific yew is protected out here. When we log any areas, they are marked off and they're not cut or damaged.
Okay, Pacific yew. And I know that there's the Oregon ash along the Nehalem along my property. It's unfortunately a tasty tree. One of the troubles with some of the cedars and the Oregon ash is that they're very tasty. And the other thing is they need the right environment. I see Oregon ash near water, and the big leaf maple appears to need a fair amount of water. And it's kind of, to me, it seems selective in its habitat. Do you find that also, Herb?
In the Clatsop State Forest, even on my property here at Jewell, there's a lot of maple trees scattered through the area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of, yeah, it's all over. And another thing about maple trees, if they are cut, they will grow without replanting. They sprout again like a redwood.
Yes, they certainly do.
So then, do you have a consensus to add that?
Yes, to add. So this would be to add it under a different policy?
To create a new policy for it, probably
Okay.
adding it in this area.
I have a question on in my experience living my life and logging, I've never seen a yellow cedar tree out here in the Clatsop Forest, ever. I have in Alaska, but not out here. And I don't know if that's maybe along the coast in there around Seaside or the swampy areas, Clatsop Plains, but I've never seen any out here in the Jewell area at all, a yellow cedar. You know, if you're worried about a natural tree, I don't know if that is one. Maybe Dawn knows there's some around the Clatsop Plains, that area, but out here, no.
Yes, I do know about the yellow cedar. It was a very important tree to the Chinook Nation. The the root systems, especially used for utensils, and the hell, they even during World War II, they even used yellow cedar for propellers, and even used them for propellers on boats and ships or whatever. Anyway, there was a use for them, but there was never a consensus to replant them or reestablish them after they were harvested. And you have to realize the Chinook Nation, although this is a bone of contention with the Oregon Forestry Association or whatever that advertises on TV, the Chinook Nation has never ever espoused or practiced or encouraged clear cutting. And you got to realize that a lot of clear cutting in the past has been done, and no responsible tree planting has taken place until in the recent years with the for reforestation plans and laws put into place. But yeah, the trees I listed here basically have been displaced by hemlock and Douglas fir in the clear cutting operations. And so it is rare for us, for our people, to come across these trees in our lands, our former lands. But we would like to see them back again. They all have specific uses and are very important to our culture. I know that private properties out there and class up land have big leaf maple on them. But by and large, if you look at the whole county by itself or the whole area by itself, the big leaf maple plays no significant role other than it's ornamental for most property owners that are in class-up land. And again, on the Oregon ash, every paddle that has been constructed from time immemorial has been constructed from the Pacific or the Oregon ash. The ash tree is most beneficial, one of the most beneficial trees for the Chinook culture, because all of the paddles are made from that tree, and from time immemorial. And of course, we see them when we can on wetlands and some isolated areas like a lakes or a stream that doesn't see much activity. But by and large, the Oregon ash is very limited in its because it's a product of a byproduct of waste when clear cutting takes place. And
Yes.
anyway,
Yes, and it's I believe, a very long-lived tree. I agree, it's an important tree. It needs to be studied as to how to plant it so it will grow well, because it does need wet ground to do well. And I want to comment on the big leaf maple. I think it should be studied for carbon capture. I think with the wood mass growth each year, as well as the leaf mass growth and the leaf drop creating huge stores of carbon in the soil, I think it's an extremely important tree for carbon capture. And I don't know that it's ever been studied for that. So I think I would like to then say that the county's going to create another policy, and I don't know the wording, but we've stated the trees, correct? And what would the policy say? You just said
Well,
something, but you should
well,
read it again.
So what we had done, Gail had put in under the proposed policies, a new policy that would encourage replanting of 6 native tree species: red cedar, yellow cedar, Oregon ash, Pacific yew, big leaf maple, and Sitka spruce.
This is Pam. I
I have a
like that wording, and I would support a new policy.
Okay.
Where are these trees to be planted? What was the original place where they were to be planted? What we kind of got, is this the whole county, or what are we talking about here?
I think that the where this came up was on the environmentally fragile areas that we were discussing earlier.
I'd like to see that put in there.
The
Anybody
location.
Or-
We were talking about fragile and economically valuable areas, especially wetlands, isolated lakes, stands of old growth timber, and rare or endangered species that will be considered for natural designation.
Okay, and Dawn was talking about those dead trees we talked about at Red Bluff or Nehalem Park, where the trees are dangerous and a fire threatening. That would be a good place to plant some of those trees too out here at Elsie, Dawn. If those dead and endangered trees were taken out, you could replant. It's wet enough in that area, I know, well, you could grow the yew, maple, and ash probably, and of course cedar, if the elk didn't eat them. Elk really like cedar.
That's true.
I don't know if they hate them or they love them, but boy, you plant them and they get rid of them usually. It's tough to get cedar to grow.
Yeah, they love them. There's no hate, they love them.
Okay, so what Gail has revised it to say, and let me know what you all think: in fragile and ecologically valuable areas, especially wetlands, isolated lakes, stands of old growth timbers, and areas of rare or endangered species, the replanting of 6 native species shall be encouraged. And then we have the list of the 6: red cedar, yellow cedar, Oregon ash, Pacific yew, big leaf maple, and of course Sitka spruce.
This is Pam. That's good. I think we should clarify it. We will all know why we're encouraging those, but should we also add culturally significant or something that explains why we want to focus on those species?
They are culturally significant to Chinook, as I mentioned earlier, but that would be appropriate too if you wanted to do that. I'm trying to inject what some may not know, or as viable information.
Right. Yeah,
So,
no, I think culturally also would be a good thing to put in there.
So the replanting of 6 native tree species significant to the Chinook. I'm just looking. Dawn, can you give me some words?
The Chinook Indian Nation is fine.
Okay.
That takes all care. We're under the 5 tribes are historically under the label of Chinook Indian Nation.
Okay.
We have a federally we have a federal docket 234 that helps cement that information. I sent that information to Gail so that she could get better background.
Okay, so what we've got now is the replanting of 6 native tree species significant to the Chinook Indian Nation, red cedar, yellow cedar, et cetera. So we've injected that into the policy. Is everybody okay with that?
This is Pam. I am.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Herb Olstead here.
So I think we're all in agreement. Unless I hear otherwise, I will say we will accept the new wording for a policy number. Would you want to number the policy or just new policy?
We're not numbering them at this time. We're just calling them new policies, and it'll all be part of a sheet that gets distributed and worked in.
Okay, good. So
Right.
we're ready to move on to community development. Is that right? Did we cover policy 2? No, maybe we didn't do policy 2. Predominant use for natural areas will be open space, scientific study, wildlife habitat, low and low intensity recreation, trails, nature observation. Anybody have comments on that?
This is Pam. I agree with staff recommendation to retain the policy.
Any other discussion? And if no more discussion, I would assume we're all in agreement. Okay. I say that we do staff recommendation of retain policy. And then we'll move on to the next heading, Community Development - Natural Places, Policy 1. Again, back to Onion Peak. The summit under Onion Peak boundary as described in the Preserve Analysis, September 1979, by the Natural Area Preserve Advisory Committee, and a small meadow on the summit of Sugarloaf Mountain support a subalpine type grass, bald, or rock garden communities with 11 or more rare and endangered species. These are areas to be designated natural and preserved for research and education. An established hiking trail is not recommended as the areas are small and fragile and could not tolerate tramping and soil erosion. And the pictures I've seen of, actually, I should let other people comment first and then I'll comment. Does anybody want to comment on the policy 1? The staff recommends we retain policy.
This is Pam. I agree with staff recommendation to retain the policy.
So do I.
Donna Bing concurs.
I would like to see probably the Onion Peak area is pretty well established as to the physical area. And I think just saying a small meadow on the summit of Sugarloaf Mountain probably doesn't describe the exact area in case people were going in there and messing with the area and damaging the area. If it's not very carefully defined, I think it should be better defined geographically. And perhaps more stringent wording about people going in there and disturbing the area. Myself, I probably should have said that before everybody else commented. How do other people feel about that?
This is Pam. Is that within our jurisdiction, Gail?
Yeah, so the area that your committee covers, for those who can see it on the screen, it's basically pretty much the south half, maybe third of the county, probably third of the county to half. And it extends all the way from our eastern border out to the ocean, with the exception of the Arch Cape Falcon Cove area, which is southwest coastal. So all of that area is what you'd be looking at. And Sugarloaf is definitely within that, as is Onion Peak.
Thank you. This is Pam again. I didn't phrase my question very well. Is it something we can map? Susanna wanted to see if we could be more specific about location. And is that something the county has jurisdiction to do, is what I really meant.
Yeah, so being able to identify the area is definitely within the county's jurisdiction, and all that we would be doing is just basically pointing to an area on a map. So there's really no regulation. Well, there kind of is regulation associated with it through the comp plan, but just identifying it and pinpointing where this policy would apply to would be within our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. Then I like Susanna's idea of trying to identify or narrow it down a little more accurately.
If I have a question, is the natural area under policy when you refer to the natural area preserve advisory committee? Is that still in effect, in existence?
I'm sorry, Susanna, this is Julia. I didn't actually hear what you said.
In policy 1, it's referencing a natural area preserve advisory committee. Is that still in existence?
It's possible, but it's not a county committee.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a state committee or not. That's something that we could look and find.
Yeah. Because I've seen a documentary on those areas and how they have evolved. They were isolated and they've evolved with their flora and fauna for millions of years, maybe. I mean, it's really a remarkable area. It's very important to a lot of people who are studying these things. And I would perhaps want to talk to more people in actually defining the area, and perhaps who has the easement, North Coast Land Conservancy. I would talk to them also, because I think it's a really important area.
So
And
Gail has.
I was just going to say, it has never, I believe, ever naturally reforested, and that's part of it. And so it's not an area for regular forestry practices. The important part of it. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is Gail is underneath the staff recommendation added a sentence that says retain policy but need to better define the geographic area of the small meadow on Sugarloaf Mountain. And I would remind you that basically the last sentence of policy 1 says that we do not recommend establishing a hiking trail as the area is small and fragile and could not tolerate trampling and soil erosion. So basically all this policy really is doing is saying this area exists, it's fragile, and we don't recommend developing it for human use, for people to go up and love too much, because that's what we tend to do as human beings. But anyway,
I just would like to get more feedback from people who have studied the area to make sure that they like, if that wording is, if it couldn't be stronger, or if they would want to change it, or they're happy with it. Could we do that, just outreach to Nature Conservancy and people they may recommend that have been studying it and know the importance of it?
So verify with, and Gail's adding this, verifying with the North Coast Land Conservancy regarding the language in the policy.
Yes, also location, defining the location and the language. Yes, please.
Okay.
And is that okay with everybody? For any additions to that policy, or is everybody good with what Gail is going to add to it?
You might
This is
want to
Pam.
add another. You might want to add another S to grass.
I was wondering if that was on purpose.
Actually, that is a very specific term.
Oh,
and
it
if
is.
It is. If you look that up, it's an actual very specific term that means that type of a grassy area that does not grow trees.
Hmm.
A grass bald
Any
is, I think it's French.
uh-huh. Any other comments? And if no more comments, then I would say that everybody's in agreement to retain the policy with research onto more wording and location description, perhaps better wording. Does that sound okay? Okay, well.
This is Pam. Yes.
Okay, so everybody's in agreement to retain policy and new wording. And then to move on to the policy 2, the Elmer, and would you pronounce that?
Feldenheimer?
Okay, where is that?
That is actually sort of the backside of Tillamook Head. So on the south side of Seaside, if you go up through the cove and you go up to the end of the road there's a trailhead. And if you walk back in, that is that area. And so it's the backside, kind of the backside of Ecola State Park is the Elmer Feldenheimer Forest Preserve.
Okay. And yes, I know in other times in last month, maybe we would discuss, one of the times we discussed Tillamook Head and mining it, and it seems like all of those areas, that area needs to be carefully mapped out and delineated, because I think there's a lot going on there, as well as all the towers, communication towers. I mean, there's a lot going on at Tillamook Head. But that's nothing to do with designating that forest preserve natural. Anybody against the staff recommendation of retaining policy on the Elmer Feldenheimer Forest Preserve becoming a designated natural area? If there's no more comments, I would say we follow staff recommendations and retain policy. And then to move on to the Saltic Highlands policy. The highlands should be designated as a resources uses other than woodland, wildlife habitat, low intensity recreation, natural and mineral resources shall be controlled by the county to avoid conflicts. Any comments on that?
This is Pam. I agree with staff recommendation.
And Under the mineral resources, just a comment that it be not impactful, because the mineral resources would be gravel mining, I assume, and that it not be too impactful. But every proposal would be scrutinized by county, right? I'm not sure if there's any wording to put in there. Any comments from county when you're reviewing gravel extraction and how it might interface with the anyway, I'm sorry. My brain stopped.
I'm trying to understand what the question is. So the highlands, the basaltic highlands area, what the policy says is that they should be designated as a resource. And so uses other than as woodland, as wildlife habitat, as low intensity recreation, the natural or mineral resources shall be controlled by the county to avoid conflicts. We're saying retain the policy, but honestly, the natural and mineral resources, anytime there's any kind of a change in mining operations, that's entirely regulated by the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. And if anybody is going to expand a boundary, for example, or change a reclamation area or something like that, they need a permit both from Dogami and from the county. So it's pretty highly regulated.
Okay. But why do you say the county to avoid conflicts? Have there been conflicts?
We haven't had an expansion of mineral or mining, really a significant one, any place in the last 15 years that I'm aware of. We've had a couple of expansions, mostly with adding reclamation sites. But I mean, the conflicts, that's avoiding the conflict is part of the conditional use permit process to make sure that it's not going to conflict with other uses, but also that other uses don't conflict with it. Remember that the mining operation is a resource itself. So among the things that we do when people want to move into those areas is point out that, you know, there's a mining operation there. And so, I mean, this is just something that we tell people when they move in. Hey, by the way, this forest zone has a mining operation in it, and so you can expect certain types of uses. Honestly, the realtors probably should be making those statements too. We don't actually have any language in the code that states that that should be part of a disclosure statement, and I don't know, Pam, you probably can answer this better than I. Is that part of a disclosure for real estate transactions?
The closest thing that would apply at the bottom of the disclosure is something like, are you aware of any other issues? I don't have the exact language in front of me that would affect this property that a buyer should know. It's a really broad statement, and so it's up to the seller to use their conscience to fill that in to the best of their knowledge, but nothing specific about mining or forestry or ag.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess at the county level, what I would say is people call and are researching properties, and we as staff try to identify for them what they can use their property for and what typically the neighborhood is like. So they might be looking to build a home in an area where there's a lot of dairy going on, and so, you know, dairy is a protected under goal 3. But a lot of people, once they move in next to a dairy, find that they don't care for it. For example, I mean, it's, you know, to get off the mineral resources, but just any of these things. So it's people doing their due diligence because the resources and their use are protected from people too. I mean, it's when they say avoiding conflicts, it's human interface with these resource activities. So anyway,
well,
what this says is that the highlands should be designated as a resource and that these are the uses.
Well, you had said something about maybe more language about to me, there should be stronger language from the realtors. Anybody's going to be next to a mining operation, a gravel pit, because in this county, gravel mining really is blasting rock to pulverize rock, and it is it's very noisy. When they blast, because I live not that far from Buster Creek gravel pit, it's not very often. But I'm not that close, but if you're close enough, it can be really impactful. And I think that you had said something earlier about notifying, making realtors disclose more. I don't know what the county can do about that, but I think mining, a dairy is a dairy. You know when you're moving next to a dairy, and if you want to think about it, it'll smell, and I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think gravel mining is near so obvious, the blasting part of it. So I encourage stronger wording if it can happen in the real estate disclosure stuff.
Well, and that's not something the county would control. I mean, you could just recommend that that be part of a disclosure statement, but that's not anything the county regulates at all.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand.
So
Okay.
usually zoning is what we use to avoid these conflicts. I mean, if it's the F80 zone or the AF zone, which is where we have a lot of the mining and these types of resources, these other resources, it's difficult to build a house there, for example. So that in itself, the zoning helps avoid the conflicts. It's, the primary use of zoning is to keep uses with compatible uses. I mean, that's the whole point of it.
Yes. Okay, so under the Basaltic Highlands policy, any more discussion? Is anybody against the staff recommendation, retain policy? And hearing nobody, I would say that we will retain the policy. And then moving on to the table 3, new issues and policies work. Is this okay to move on? So table 3, new issues and policies worksheet, open spaces, natural areas, and wilderness areas.
So these were just some things that staff identified, plus we've added in the policy that you're recommending. So if there's anything there in particular you'd like to discuss?
Does anybody want to discuss? I had some notes that I want to look at. And does anybody want to make comments? So the first one is cluster development in Clatsop Plains. And I actually have recommendation required subdivisions to be clustered county-wide. And I would like to see that happening more, right, in the possibility in the Jewell area if they change this zoning in the future. If there's more pressure for more housing in the next 20 years. I think that 6 months ago or a year ago, there was a meeting at Jewell School where we were saying how many more houses were in the area along the Nehalem back, especially like in the days of the logging camp. All the houses that were left behind that have slowly aged and come down and disappeared. I know I have several on my property, and I think that throughout the Nehalem River Valley, there are a lot of old places that are no longer in existence, showing that I think the population densities were much greater. I mean, there was Jewell School, Vine Maple School, which the photograph I saw of it showed quite a large school, and a school at Elsie. And I think that when we get into the population part, that if you can have new technology where houses need less water, I've mentioned this before, and I believe Kathleen Sullivan once, of less water to do the household, there could be more permitting. I see the thing that creates more development. The big limiting factor to me is water, and the protection of our watersheds and the river, and the whole issue of water gets pretty complex. So that's just the other thing that I would like to see on cluster development is you're creating basically open spaces. And it looks like one of the things that people, I want to say, fantasize about in cluster development is that you have conjoined open space with housing in a central area, which in a bigger area you can have shared septic and water and all of that, and water systems and all of that. And then you have a large open space. Are you in agreement with what I'm saying, Gail, and both of you?
This is Julia. Did the folks who are present, did you want a brief description of what clustering is? Because it's not, at this time, it's just required on the Clatsop Plains, and you might not have noticed it in other areas. So basically with cluster development, if, for example, you have a tract, let's say a tract of 25 acres, and it's zoned RA5, which is not uncommon out in the Elsie, Jewell, and Seaside rural areas. We do have some RA5 tracts left that are not divided. So if we were to have a cluster requirement in that area, then what we would be doing is requiring that the tract be divided in such a way so that you still got your 5 acres per dwelling, but that the houses would be clustered in a more central area so that there is not as much disturbance of the resource area. So there's more wildlife habitat, there's less removal of trees that before they need to be harvested or preserved, whatever. And we don't have as many utilities that have to be laid. There's just less disruption. So you would still have your 5 acre tracts, 5 acre lots, parcels in your 25 acre area, but the houses would all be maybe around a common cul-de-sac, for example, so that we don't have as many utility lines and roads, for example.
Can I ask you also to define density transfer? Did that come up in today's thing?
I don't know that we have density transfer in any of these, but density transfer at this time is only permitted on the Clatsop Plains. A density transfer is where we take I'm sorry? Okay, so density transfer is where we take a development right, say the ability to build a single family dwelling, and the property owner may look at the property that they have and say, well, yes, it's zoned RA2 and I could put a house here, except the entire thing is wetland. So it's really, and maybe it's significant wetland, so I can't actually develop it, but I have the right, so they can take the density credit or the right to build a house and remove it from that property and transfer it to another property that is perhaps more appropriate to be built. What the original property that they removed the density credit from is then downzoned to open space or some other zoning that does not permit development. Maybe it might become like in wetlands or something like that, that's appropriate for non-development, it's appropriate for habitat. It leaves it open space and it takes that credit and it transfers the ability to develop over to another property still within the same planning area. in this case, the Clatsop Plains, and it increases the density over there where it's already irrevocably committed to development. So that's what density transfer is.
Is that you, Herb? Somebody's trying to comment, I think. No? Okay. So I think this is an important topic. I would say in the Nehalem River area, I would love to see, or not, maybe love to see is not right. I would like to see discussed density transfer out of the floodplains. Because a lot of people, the only possibility they have to build is near the river, and I think both to protect the river and to protect housing and everything else, I think perhaps a density transfer idea might be suitable. An idea that probably would need some study.
Okay.
And I would like to hear from Pam and Herb, who know the area well, what they think about this stuff, about using cluster development and density transfer and as a possibility for our area.
Julia, this is Pam. Did I understand you correctly to say that a density transfer credit, if you will, could be used in any zoning? Like if you had an F80, would you be allowed one home site on an F80 without going through a template test using density transfer?
It's at this time, I think that's probably something that would have to be part of the I doubt you could transfer it to F80. That's something we would have to actually do some research on. At this time, it's just on the Clatsop Plains, and there isn't the F80 zoning. We've got RA2 and RA5 zoning, so it's rural lands, which permits development of homes. So it's I'm going to guess that it probably doesn't get to go to resource lands, but I don't know. I'd have to do the research.
Okay, thank you. Would it be more straightforward? Well, no, it wouldn't. I've answered my own question. Never mind. On any, I would like to see this policy of clustering extend countywide. I like that idea. I think it's lighter on the land, and more sustainable for utilities, driveways, paving over permeable soils, etc.
And back to what I had said about development transfer. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the terminology, where you have the ability to build and you move that to some other place. What is that called?
Well, that's your density transfer.
Oh, it is density transfer. Oh, okay. Because as I said, I think about some people who have big tracts of land along the Nehalem, and a lot of it is, I believe there's a piece, some of the bigger pieces have, I believe, development areas, but they're in the floodplains. And if they could kind of cluster development on high ground, closer to like Highway 103, I'm thinking of just south of where the Agrons live, the big field that used, I don't know who owns it now.
With the pink house?
Yes. And I forgot how many acres, and I believe they have building sites, and there's kind of rocky high ground near the road, and I think there could be, possibly 2 home sites there, but a lot of it is in the floodplain, and I think in the south of the house, perhaps cluster development if they wanted to high ground. I think that it just as an example of a place that would work there.
Well, I think that's all zoned RA5, and the lots are rectangular with some river frontage and then coming up the hill up toward 103. So there's already a place to build a home on each parcel up closer to the road out of the floodplain.
Oh, the way it's platted out?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So they could perhaps naturally cluster with houses close to each other. Okay. But I just think it's a concept that I would like to have looked into more for our area and not just be designated for Clatsop Plains.
So you would agree with the staff recommendation?
Well, my computer just shut. Let me see here. Yes, to be clustered countywide. I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
And this is Pam. I agree with that. I like that recommendation.
Any other discussion? Any other opposition? Is there any opposition? If not, I don't hear anybody. So we accept staff recommendation, require subdivisions to be clustered countywide. All right, and then moving on to the next staff comment. An open space acquisition program is a tool local governments can use to protect Goal 5 resources such as open space, wetlands, historic sites, and scenic sites. Open space acquisition can also be used as a hazard mitigation tool. For example, land in a floodplain can be acquired and managed for flood storage. And the staff recommendation encourage the development of an open space acquisition program and identify potential ongoing funding sources. Note, the recommended program could be voluntary, opportunistic, not a use of eminent domain. Any discussion?
This is Pam. Is this an appropriate place to add within that, as far as hazard mitigation, sites for carbon sequestration, or anything we can do to mitigate climate change?
Okay,
Did you guys
well,
hear my
yeah,
statement?
this is Gail. I'll go ahead and answer that. So I think it could be a way the county could use an acquisition program to purchase property that the county would then place in a permanent easement that would be used for carbon sequestration. But these, again, would have to be voluntary sales. There wouldn't be anything that the county would go in and use eminent domain on. Also, being put on an acquisition list is also voluntary. So even if the county identified specific properties that they thought were very strategic, the property owner could ask not to be included on the list.
Yes, I think that it might be an important program for the future as carbon credits, the carbon market, I think, will keep evolving, and there may be a way to make money off of what would be considered kind of a woodlot, a small part of trees, but because a woodlot is how many acres, up to how many acres?
Do you mean from a taxing perspective?
Well, there's the big forestry, there's small forest owners, and then there's
I don't know that number.
small woodlot, I think, designation, and it might be assessment and taxation.
I think it
Well-
is. What I'm finding, this is Pam, this concept really caught my eye. On a personal note, I've been trying to place a conservation easement on my 20 acres for years. And none of the land trusts are interested because it is only 20 acres. I've been working with the Climate Trust, and right now they won't work with anybody with less than 40 acres, even though to provide carbon sequestration, you don't have to have contiguous acreage. Even an acre, if somebody had 1 acre and somebody else had another acre and we put together 40 acres, even though they're not contiguous, they still sequester the same amount of carbon. So I'm just throwing that out there because I agree with Susanna that I think this could be a useful tool in the future, of course, dependent on funding, as are most things. So I would encourage adding that language into this, into the staff comment.
Yes, I think it might work well with cluster development because you would have a lot more natural area then that could have trees and make money off of carbon growing in the trees and things like that. So,
Okay, this is Julia. Gail has stepped away from her for a moment. I don't have the ability to control the screen right now, so I can't add the language. But if you want us to put something together, we can include that as part of the minutes, and then you can see it at your next meeting.
yes.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Dawn and Herb, any comments?
No, I'm okay.
I'm fine.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, so we accept staff recommendation with added wording that we will look at later at a later meeting.
Okay, regarding carbon sequestration.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Julia, can you hear me?
Yes?
Julia, I just want to make this real plain and that no eminent domain type of thing can be used at all during this, the county forcing people to sell.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
for me.
eminent domain is out. Not a use of eminent domain.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's accepted, and we will move on then to the next staff comment. At the time of adoption of Goal 5 in 1979, several Clatsop County sites were to be added to Oregon Isles Wilderness. New sites mentioned but not shown as listed in the goal. Also, other sites have been included in the interim. It would be prudent to verify that all sites in the federal listing are included in the county's Goal 5 resources. So I do have a question. So all those, these are offshore island areas, right, off the coast?
Yes.
And again, they're in our planning area?
No, these would not be in your planning area. But these are offshore in the Pacific, so some of them are going to be off of the Southwest Coastal Planning Area. some of them that goes up through Cannon Beach. So there might be a few of them in your planning area right north of Arch Cape and south of Cannon Beach. Anyway, there's a series of rocks and islands. And the listing has grown over the years, and so staff was just recommending basically that we have a goal in there. It's probably a goal for staff anyway, to make sure, because we are actually required to include them in Goal 5, to make sure that we actually have everything listed.
Right. Good. And I would accept the staff recommendation, which is recommend verification that all Clatsop County sites in the Oregon Isles Wilderness Area be listed as a Goal 5 resources in Clatsop County's comprehensive plan. And I would like, if anybody else has anything to say, please say it. Otherwise, we will, if there's no opposition voices, I'd say we accept it. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'm assuming we're all in agreement. Yes, yes. So we will accept staff recommendation. Then moving on to the next staff comment, which is there will be benefit to identifying potential candidates for listing as natural areas to support state, federal, local, and private property owners' future goals, and to include new scientific concepts related to natural areas to remain useful state and federal land management planning. And the staff recommendation to that is identify natural areas not previously addressed in periodic reviews and inventory significant areas for future consideration as areas listed in the Oregon State Register of Natural Heritage Resources, should the property owners wish to participate. So I'm just going to jump in here with somewhere in all of that you mentioned Elsie Cemetery, and I think that Jewell Cemetery should be listed. And I have a list of things I would like to kind of cover, but I don't know if I should under this one. There were listings of lakes, and because I think this one we're on right now, this proposed policy, is the last on our to-do list. Is that correct? Other than public comment and
Right. So where you are in your right now, you were pretty much supposed to be through with your discussion on the policies and goals and into public comment right now. We will be returning not in February, but March, hopefully, to wetlands and trying to finish up Goal 5 at that time. With this particular staff comment and recommendation, it was just a matter of maybe identifying areas not previously identified that should be just kind of held on a list that county goals and policies would support listing if the property owners chose to, wanted to, if it was beneficial to them in some way. Just because sometimes it's helpful if something is mentioned in a goal or policy, it's helpful if somebody then can point to it and say, look, see, this supports what I want to do with my land. So it's not something that you need to come up with a list right now. It was just kind of an idea to throw out there and maybe just throw it down the road and say, just this is a policy or this is a goal that we would during future meetings identify areas that might be considered for future net listing if the property owners wish to participate.
so yes, so I have a list, but before I go through mine, anybody else want to comment or want to identify some natural areas that haven't been identified or addressed? So if nobody has anything right now, I'll move to some of mine, and then if people think of more, please let us know. So David Douglas County Park was commented, and one of my notes is, what is the status now of the David Douglas? I gather that it's east of Saddle Mountain State Park, that there's the state park and there's a county park adjacent to it. Is that correct?
Susanna, I'm not familiar with it.
Because that is somewhere, and I didn't notate where page it was. Probably in the old, you know, you have in the bottom whenever they were written up, where the typing is not very easy to read sometimes. Do you know what I mean? At the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so there was that. Another one is, has Saddle Mountain State Park been included as a natural heritage conservation area? I think that was referenced somewhere, but
Well,
I
we
think
have,
it was going to be
oh,
proposed, but
so Susanna, are you looking at the Goal 5, the Clatsop County Goal 5 resource inventory? Because, for example, Saddle Mountain State Park is listed in there. Bradwood Cliffs, Walker Creek Old Growth Forest, Elsie County Park, also known as Nehalem or Red Bluff. David Douglas County Park is listed there, Onion Peak, Sugarloaf. Some of those, so those are already listed as ecologically and scientifically significant natural areas. For example, wilderness areas, the only one we've got is the Oregon Islands Wilderness. So I guess we're looking to see if there's anything that might be useful to somebody, maybe a private landowner down the road. But as I said, I mean, you mentioned the Elsie and Jewell cemeteries.
well, Elsie's Cemetery has been mentioned several times because it's all part of Red Bluff Park. It's that whole area. The trouble is that 26 runs through it, and the fact that it's, to me, a dangerous spot for turning off of the highway. But the Jewell Cemetery, I did not see mentioned in today's listings. I don't know if it's listed anywhere, but
Is it in the
and
historical sites?
I didn't catch it as I looked at things again last night.
Yeah,
It's just,
it's
you know, it's
it's
a historical cemetery. I mean, to me, it's an important cemetery for sure. And unfortunately, John Agrin has having some problems, some health problem. I mean, some kind of being able to focus problems. He ended up being the go-to person for the cemetery, not officially, just unofficially. Most of, I think, the area, the plots were owned by people. But anyway, it's an important thing to be sure to be included in things. And then I did not. Oh no, Lost Lake was mentioned, and I think about having wetlands, and I don't know what list Lost Lake was. I wrote it down because I'm thinking that it perhaps wasn't given enough scrutiny. The one that was never mentioned is a Quartz Creek wetlands lake. I'm sure that must be wetlands in there. And I think it's Times of Lake. I don't really know, you know, the whole hydraulic cycle of the Quartz Creek Lake wetlands area, but it needs to be mentioned. I don't know who owns it. Herb, do you know who owns it?
Owns what?
The
The Quartz Creek area?
Yeah,
That's forestry, Oregon State Forestry.
ODF, okay.
Yeah.
And it looks like some places that ODF lands are included in the county inventories, correct? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, Bradley State Park, Saddle Mountain State Park. So Some of those are state-owned. Oswald West State Park.
Okay, so definitely Quartz Creek Lake Wetlands needs to be included. And where is Flatiron Mountain?
I'm not sure, and
I know where it is.
oh, of
It's
course you
on
do.
the Quartz Creek on, up above the Quartz Creek Bridge to the right, Quartz Creek Road, and out that ridge going towards the Nehalem River, going west, southwest.
Okay.
Or the ODF property.
Okay. And then in this, it has been brought up on, I have down page 20, and I know in prior meetings I have brought this up, but it again says isolated forest wetlands because of their size, and you don't say define size, goes on to say are not considered to have significant wetland values. And I don't know, either that language is still in the wording somewhere in what we received. And again, I want to say that that's, to me, totally not appropriate wording. That the Nehalem River, the whole riparian fish population, all needs their wetlands, and they're not, a lot of them are not the really large significant wetlands as can appear on the coast, but even if they're small, that does not mean that they don't have significant wetland value. So
This is Pam. I agree with that. Just like I've learned about carbon sequestration, even small sites can have a big impact on an ecosystem.
and the other, also the Walker old growth was commented on. Do you know anything about it? Somehow I'm thinking it might have gotten cut. Do you know if they're still in the, I'm not sure where the Walker area is, and
Okay, it's way up Bannocky Creek, and you take a left-hand turn or right-hand turn, excuse me, at the 3 mile and go up Walker Creek, which it flows into Bannocky Creek.
okay.
And I think State Highway owns that now.
I mean, who owns it?
Oregon, the Department of Highway and Recreation, whatever I believe they purchased it about a year ago.
And is there still
something of it.
Is there still old growth there?
Very few. There's scattered trees. I believe it's about 200 acres now in that area, but Highway Department owns it.
Well,
Which the last I
go ahead. So, because there is so little old growth in Clatsop County, I would like to have that looked into as to a, an old growth resource, however one may want to state it. I also have a note about McGregor and headwaters of Olson Creek, which, Herb, is that also part of the Salmonberry drainage?
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm not really familiar with that wording on that area, but yeah, I believe it is. Sterling Ranch area, off to the right of the rest area, up in that neighborhood.
And I know that there was some logging in there, which I believe increased the temperature of the Salmonberry, and a lot of the steelhead people were concerned. By now, the tree should be coming up enough. I wouldn't think that's such an issue, but it was a the Salmonberry is a really important steelhead, or was a really important steelhead spawning ground in the county. Well, is it
Not
all in the county? I'm
not
not
to
sure.
interrupt. Not to interrupt, but I'm going to have to anyway. I wanted to let you know that you need to think about wrapping up your conversation. Your public input was supposed to be at 11:30. You don't have public present. Your closing comments and adjournment was supposed to be at 11:45. We're coming up on noon, so we are going to need to wrap this up. I'm going to suggest that if you have ideas to add to some sort of an inventory, and it's really going to be something that's just kind of a nice list or suggestion for the future, for people who might need it as a resource, to be able to point to it as a support system for some sort of an application that they make down the road. If you have some ideas about properties, you could actually email them to me, and then I can just put them in as part of your minutes for your review next time. But I do need to ask you to consider kind of closing off your meeting for today.
Yeah. So I want to do a couple of things. One is to ask the committee about moving to the second Friday. My concern is this month we are before the countywide meeting, so all of our comments today will go before the countywide meeting next Thursday. But in February, the third Friday is after the countywide meeting. We will get behind on our topics, is my fear. And so I would like to move to the second Friday, if that's okay with everybody.
This is Pam. I'm fine with that. Julia, are there any staff conflicts with that?
I don't know at this time.
Yeah, I mentioned it to Gail, and she felt she could be free that second Friday.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any second Friday conflicts at this point, Susanna, so I think staff should be okay with that.
Yeah. And everybody else? Here,
Fine with me.
Yeah? Okay. Good. All right. Also, last month I had volunteered to be the liaison person from our area to the countywide meetings. And yet at the beginning of, and we agreed on at this meeting, you said it was still open. Is it okay if I'm the countywide for at least next week's countywide meeting on Thursday?
I'm fine with that. This is Pam.
So is that okay, staff? I was approved last month's meeting.
Yeah, they did agree to have you be the liaison last month, Susanna.
Okay. Was there anything else? And then next month we will establish a chair and vice chair, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I think that's everything for me. And anything else? We're 3 minutes away from noon. Anybody else? Anything from the county to say? All right. I guess I then will call for an end of the meeting. Is that correct?
You are welcome to adjourn if no one has anything else. I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand or making comments. So if you'd like to be adjourned at 11:57, you certainly can be.
Okay, no last comments in 2 minutes? Okay, then we will be adjourning the meeting today at 11:58. And thank you all.